Everybody, and welcome to our lunchtime series of webinars here at the Ireland Chapter of the PMI. Today our topic is Agile in Heavily Regulated Industries, and we are supported today by the sponsorship of Comtrade Digital Services, and we're also delighted to have Mirjana Slapničar with us today. Hi Mirjana.
Hello.
So thank you for joining us today, and we are returning to a very popular topic of Agile. So my name is Katrina Collins and I'm the Director of Events, and you'll all be familiar with me at this stage. We have some small technical difficulties today, so unfortunately you can't see Mirjana in person, but you will be able to hear Mirjana. Hi Mirjana.
Hello. Can you hear me? Is everything all right?
Perfect, I can hear you perfectly. So guys, today we have Mirjana joining us to speak about Agile in Heavily Regulated Industries. She comes to us from Comtrade Digital Services, where she's been for over 10 years. She comes to us with over 20 years experience in project management across a variety of industries. So Agile is a very popular topic among our members. So perhaps you're already working in an Agile environment, or you might be studying for your certification, or you might just be interested in getting involved in Agile. So from previous webinars, we have noted a few people have said Agile may not be suited to every environment. So today, Mirjana was going to talk to us about Agile in heavily regulated industries, and is there a place for Agile there? So before I hand over to Mirjana, as usual, guys, I want to say a quick word about our Menti poll. So grab your phone or open a second browser on your laptop or PC and go to menti.com, use the code 3462751. As usual with the webinar, because it's quite one way, we like to get your interaction and your involvement in the webinar, and we particularly want to use it at the end for some Q&A and some comments. So time allowing, we'll try and take some questions and comments at the end, but Mirjana has promised that if there's any difficult questions or meaty questions, that she will take those away and she'll have a look at them afterwards and send us an update. So now's your chance. If you've got some tricky questions there, you've got an expert to bounce some questions off of. So without further ado, Mirjana, I shall say thank you very much for joining us today, and I will stop sharing and let you take over.
Thank you. So thank you, Katrina, for your kind introduction. Let me just briefly take care about the technicalities about screen share here. Can you see my screen?
Perfect. Yes.
Great. So let us start. Welcome again, dear colleagues, in today's webinar, also here to my home office here in Ljubljana. I'm Mirjana Slapničar and I'm coming from Comtrade Digital Services. Now, heavily regulated systems are usually regulated with a very good reason. Here we have medicine and banking and judicial systems and space programs and aerospace and also gaming and many more. Typically, those are the areas with utmost possible impact on human society. In some cases, here we have health and implications to the very life of people. Even in other cases, we may experience a profound financial and material impact, and very often, in fact, they're both. I think I do know a bit about that because heavily regulated environments are in fact my natural habitat. My career started in biggest Slovenian commercial bank as a developer somewhere in the end of last century, and I was afterwards faithful to banking for almost 15 years. I was working firstly in the banks and other financial institutions, then for the banks. And I had the privilege of managing some of the biggest banking projects, IT projects in my home country at the time. Later on, I was engaged in some more domains, some of them also heavily regulated, some of them not. Most notably of heavily regulated other systems were medical devices. Now, I do know that quite common perception on such environments is that they are very bureaucratic, that they might be first experience of some people on that. Myself, I don't naturally lean towards the administration overly much, but in heavily regulated environments, nevertheless, I worked in, this is not what I have experienced most strongly. I have rather experienced most the sense of purpose and the complexity and the structure and the challenge it always brought. So to tackle that, it required quite a bit of creativity, and this was what I always liked. So yeah, this is my little tribute to heavily regulated environments, one might say. So today I would like to speak about how Agile can help in the regulated systems in practice, because this is what it is important for us. I wouldn't go too deep in either regulations or Agile itself today. Rather, I would talk a bit from my own personal experience and the observations I made in this time. And yeah, I hope that there will be a thing or two useful for you in your everyday life and endeavors today. I would like to touch few key challenges, few potential benefits we can have from in heavily regulated environments from Agile. I would like to give some suggestions on how we can start and maybe what is probably best avoided. So the first thing first, to challenges. One of the key challenges for Agile in heavily regulated environments may actually be regulations themselves. It is very important, in my opinion, to understand that there are different types of regulations in terms of their effect on project initiation and planning and execution and so forth. Now, to keep things simple for us today, I roughly divided them in two groups. First one affects the project matter itself. Those are the regulations about the business itself, about, for example, data protection, access and authentication, reporting to the regulator or regulators, to give just some examples. For example, banking is full of such regulations. They do not, however, affect the way the project itself is conducted. The risk here is mostly in identifying them successfully, acknowledging them, interpreting them, and that some of them are frequently updated. So we need to plan how to stay on top of that for the duration of the project. But essentially, they are nothing but requirements to us at the end. Now, the other type of regulation is something quite different, I would say. I came personally across that first in medical field, but there are also other domains regulated that way. For example, defense, I know, and possibly many others. The rules and regulations in those fields do affect the way the project is conducted. In case of medical, for example, there are stipulations about the project flow, which look on the first sight like they are written to follow waterfall, like explicitly and directly. But they can be interpreted and covered in Agile to really successful, in fact, as practical experience and many existing references show to us. Later on, I intend to give a few tips on these situations too, but now let us continue with challenges. One of the key challenges for Agile also in regulated environments also may be culture on other side, culture of the environment, of the company itself, and as well as of industry, and perception of Agile on the other. It is common and it is not really surprising, in fact, that regulated environments are more often than not reluctant to change. There are also traditionally risk averse, and very much so, which is quite understandable as their stakes are high enough already. The same and more may go to regulators, of course. Well, in regard of Agile, it had from the very beginning cultivated some sort of, let me say so, bad boy image, what with Agile Manifesto, as we can see it on the slide here. It was on purpose, I'm sure, as it was meant to emphasize the priorities as well as innovation and freshness of the Agile approach. But in case of regulated systems, it might have backfired a bit. So, excuse me. So naturally nowadays, Agile is with us for a quite long time already. It will be 20 years from Agile Manifesto at the beginning of the next year. And Agile actually became some sort of mainstream. So such perception waned somehow. In the past, there might have been actual practical difficulties in persuading regulators about compliance in Agile projects, or at least it may have taken much more, maybe, effort to do so. This was an additional reason why highly regulated systems were cautious about adopting Agile. It is not in a way surprising, I would say. Whenever in general, new idea or concept arises, it surely takes some time on the hand that the idea or concept evolves, and on the other hand, that it is accepted as safe and appropriate. But after successful early adopters break the ice, I think it's always much easier for the ones who follow. Up to now, there are successful examples of practicing Agile approach in all industries almost, I would say. We can learn from them. We have that opportunity should we think that Agile is the way we would like to explore and maybe follow in the future.
I like, Mirjana,
sorry.
I like that you made that comment there. I just made a note of it in terms of the challenges, and you spoke about the bad boy image that Agile has. So I thought that was a very interesting way of putting it.
Yeah, I know. I was banker once, and I know that I never ever put on jeans for job at that time, and this was, I think, reminded me to that effect somehow. Yeah, thank you for that, Katrina. I would like then us to continue with key benefits I personally see for regulated systems. That would be, on the first glance, for me, efficiency and effectiveness, especially as typical problem I came across in Agile, in heavily regulated industries are time to market time, which can be substantial, and also quality, which is obviously obvious benefit as heavily regulated environments are mission critical. To be sure, in general, the benefits of Agile, they're not expected that should be drastically different from the benefits that Agile may offer in general. It is more about the angle we will look into here, which would help us to answer the question we have, so how can Agile effectively help us? It is very hard, as we know, mostly next to impossible for us to envision and define every particularity of the product or project in advance. On top of that, we know that life goes on and some business or project circumstances change regardless of our intentions. In long or complex projects, this is usually especially noticeable and visible, but it do apply to projects of all sizes. To that, to change, we can react in different ways. We can either try to ignore it or reject it, or actually embrace the problem and try to absorb this need of change. What I may personally like in Agile the most is that it recognizes and also embraces this necessary change. Moreover, Agile tries to tease out the problems and the need for change as it happens in duration of the project as early as possible. Actually, with iterative approach, it has the cycles, and also with cross-functional collaboration. Because more people involved can look into the problem from different sides, and they can spot some things typically quickly. And the earlier the problems in the duration of the project are tackled, easier and cheaper to be sure it is to handle them. Either way we see fit. What I also personally like in Agile is its attitude towards nice to haves, because it's quite similar to my own attitude towards them. So nice to haves, as we know, these are the features, they are not strictly necessary, but as we are doing this, we might as well add that. It would be nice, like. But in case of nice to haves, what starts nice, it may end badly actually. It may add complexity which is not maybe at all necessary. It takes time and cost to be produced as well to be maintained, because once we put the functionality in, we need somehow live with that. The very essence of Agile, however, is to strive to produce the most added value, and so to avoid embellishments. This is also a good point here for effectiveness, I would say. As of quality, the most obvious benefit from Agile we have is better opportunity for testing. It is obviously true that the testing can begin earlier, then we have a workable system, workable solution, more comprehensive and thoughtful the testing itself and the test planning can be. But what I also really like is that there is no big bangs in Agile, no big surprises at the end. Everyone who was ever involved in the rollout of the waterfall project, especially substantial one, I think would know exactly what I'm talking about. So yeah, the specifications get made and the months may pass and the solution is delivered. And then in a short time window, everyone needs to get to know the solution and to resolve the inconsistencies, to fix the most grave errors. And off we go to the production usually, and all this with the systems we still don't know all that well, I can say. So after a certain period, the situation, this usually stabilizes, usually all ends well, right? But first few weeks or months may be unnecessarily stressful, and in the best case, and in some cases it might be really just plain terrible, to be honest, especially in the case of big systems. So if we can avoid that, I see here a few more points for quality of the system. After that, if you would like to think about venturing to Agile itself, how can we start?
And
I would say, yes.
Mirjana, just to say one thing to you, actually, because we did ask the question in the background, do you currently work with Agile practices? And we got about 33 people who answered, which is just about half the audience. And it's interesting, of the people that answered, 21 said yes, they currently work with Agile practices, and 12 said no. So you've got quite an audience on your hands at the moment. There's an interesting split there of people that don't work with it at the moment. So I think it'll be certainly interesting in terms of this next part of your presentation about how to get started. How would you bring Agile in?
Thank you. I'm glad that we have some so varied audience today. So about starting, how would we decide how we would like to start? Among other things, I think it might depend really on the level of experience in either. So if our prerogative is that we would start Agile in heavily regulated environments, We might be maybe quite familiar with these specific regulated environments we are about to work in or for, but not with Agile, or vice versa maybe. Or maybe, like it was in my case, actually, we might not be overly familiar with neither at the beginning. So in case we are familiar with Agile, but not so much with environment itself or the industry, it can probably be essential for us to first concentrate more on the environment and its specific regulations and also its specific culture. We would need, by all means, to establish exactly how they will in fact affect us and the project, as we seen a bit before. People within the regulated environments, or indeed any system, I suppose, tend to become not exactly acutely aware of the perceived environment. So, for example, as I professionally grew up in banking, I never really perceived this environment as heavily regulated. This was only when I switched sides and when I switched industries that I became fully aware of that. So when we are kind of outsiders, we often have to dig deep, I would say, and really consciously search for information specific for this environment and its culture. First point of contact, maybe quality managers would typically be the people who have that structural awareness and documentation available for us to feed in regulated environments, that's for sure. Apart from them, we can by all means benefit from experience from the project managers and test managers from recent projects. Maybe those are the people who can tell us about the typical or recent problems and pain points in the environment. This also applies for culture. I would say that we can get a lot of information about culture that way, not only regulations, right? This gathered information we will serve us to first determine how can Agile serve us best in our particular situation, and of course later on how to pursue with the project itself. But maybe, as is another case, we are really very familiar, or at least familiar with the environment, if not with particular company or institution. Perhaps we have already conducted project there in the past, or we are just really familiar with overall picture in that industry, right? We may have wondered whether Agile would aid us maybe to overcome some specific problems we see or we came across in the past in that environment. So in that case, I would actually give very similar suggestions as I usually do for an Agile start. Should we decide we want to try full Agile approach, I would definitely suggest some smaller real-life projects. Then I wouldn't go too small, as we definitely need at least several sprints to observe the process and results and grow accustomed to that cycle of refinement. Likewise, I wouldn't really choose too big a project, if for nothing else than for a pressure such a project inevitably experience in the environment. Now, the size of the project may be relative to the environment, but I would think from top of my head from maybe no less than 2 months. So we really can have few cycles under our belt, and maybe not more than 4, but it may depend from the environment itself. It is especially important, I believe, that this is a real project and not some sort of sandbox one. I really am not a fan in such cases of school projects. This is because we do not want to overthink the process itself, the Agile process itself, and focus exclusively on that, as it may happen at the beginning. Rather, we need the experience of this refining the process and refining the product in parallel. And real-life project will effectively force us to do that and to get this hands-on real-life experience. And I think really is essential in such cases. Now again, in case we don't feel full agile is right thing for us in a given moment for any reason, maybe we perceive it too complex, a project or something like that, I think it is still possible to benefit from some approaches and principles while we go. So early delivery of the working product, cross-functional collaboration throughout the project and not only in specified points, iterative improvements in the process and more are the approaches any environment can benefit from, I think. The opinion on whether this is indeed useful may be varied. I know that, but for one, I do believe it is useful because at the times when Agile wasn't yet, so popular, wasn't yet a word on anyone's mouth yet, I know that many of us were applying some of the principles of Agile in our projects without maybe fully really realizing that they are part of Agile too. Surely we did that because we were thinking how to introduce what would work best for us and our project and the team and the situation at the time. And I think that the same can surely be done now with borrowing the tools from Agile Toolbox or elsewhere, wherever we see fit. To me, the appeal of project management itself, in any case, why I'm doing that for 20 years now, is that no two projects are completely the same, and we are actually here to devise what is the best for a given situation and given project. So it's up to us, I think.
It's interesting, Mirjana, as well, just to relay it back to a comment that you said earlier about one of the benefits being quality, and you talked about, the surprises that can often happen in waterfall. One of the things that I think is a big positive about Agile is that, as you stated there, it is okay to mix and match. So I personally have seen Agile work very well in the test phases of a project, so that it's again, it wasn't the whole thing, it didn't begin at the beginning and end at the end, but we did get to see this iterative process, and it ironed out any surprises that would have come at the end. So I personally found that was a positive, and I think particularly when we talk about heavily regulated industries, I guess a lot we're talking about maybe pharmaceutical, and I think that's your experience as well, and financial. But speaking personally, I worked as a consulting project manager for years, and one area where your hands are tied is when you sell into the customer a particular product with a project, with a scope of work, with a particular time. There's a cost, so the customer is told this is going to cost you X number of dollars, and we'll give it to you in 6 months' time. And the way the Agile process starts out with the iterative process and the iterative planning, and the sprints maybe that being an option, that definitely could tie your hands at the outset. But taking your advice on board and starting small, maybe even looking at it from the test point onwards, could be a way to show people the benefits of it.
Yeah, and also I think there is no one size fits all, and it's always, I will be actually talking about that a little bit later, but I do think that also Agile is to see, where Agile can really fit in your need. I never seen any, really reason to go Agile as because of a principle. It's always worth to step a step back and to see where it really can aid us. And this is what I tried to summarize from my experience and observation for us today. It is not to say, that Agile can solve all the problems and that is fit for everything and anything, because nothing is. So It's nothing bad in that. I would like then to, yes, I promised earlier on that I will speak a bit about the situation where the regulations themselves stipulate our process. First of all, I would like to say that legislation can be often observed and fulfilled in different ways. Usually there's not one way to fulfill a specific legislation or requirement. As of me, despite spending many years in heavily regulated environments, I am, to be honest, by trade, I'm not at all keen about producing the documents which are not absolutely necessary. So not by me, not by team, but that personal trait has actually served me well in heavily regulated systems, because it is always a good choice to observe the regulation in the most pragmatic way. So it is always a good idea, I think, to look on that from different ways. How can we implement that? How can we implement it to be easiest to maintain, because the documents are sometimes more difficult to maintain than code, speaking as a ex-developer, right? But yeah, while choosing this path for us, we need to be at the same time to be sure, nevertheless, that the requirements are indeed fulfilled. So when we understand the pardon, I just stuck. Requirements from legislation and regulation point, we do need to spend the time necessary to set up our process in a right way to really ensure compliance. This is really time the best spent, and I cannot really emphasize that enough, because I did observe some cases where, yes, we will need to revisit the compliance in any case at the end, but if we need to do substantial adjustments at the end, for example, in a bit bigger medical projects, we are maybe talking about the months and not the weeks, then to really fulfill all the regulations, if not prepared well enough. This is not to scare off anyone. Please, it can be done, but it is really just so very important to take care of that. And yeah, speaking of that, one more thing, if we are unsure about the approach, we have an option to connect people with experience, and we also have a chance to connect the auditing body. For example, we in Comtrade did so when we were certifying for qualified medical software supplier at first, and this really paid off for us, I would say. So I would really recommend to everyone to, if not sure, then do seek help, and also it goes for seeking help about Agile if needed too. And what else to be careful about, in my opinion? The first thing which would come to my mind would be buy-in. So yeah, as we now know, man is an island, and to conduct Agile, we will need the cooperation of the team or even the organization. It's depending on scale or on situation. Most probably the buy-in would depend on the extent we would like to commit to Agile. And so if we would like just employ some principles or techniques, we would commit less and maybe had less problems with buy-in than if we would go like full Agile from today to tomorrow. So this is also this extent of the buy-in we need, and the buy-in we can actually get. It will inevitably affect our decision on how to proceed. And then scope, you already indicated before, Katrina, this problem. The idea of Agile is to be sure to bring the product closer to the actual needs of the customer, but sometimes in the projects with fixed scope, like with the traditional tenders, for example, there is a problem, as we are obviously dealing with the fixed resources, fixed cost, and also with predefined detailed scope. If the only way for features is to come in the scope to somehow better the product for the client experience, and we cannot put anything out, then this is definitely a risk. So in these cases, we may want to think about that in advance. This is not at all to say, again, that Agile is impossible to use in some instances, in such cases. I only say we need to give it a thought about how we tend to handle that. Most probably we will use Agile internally, so inside within the team, maybe rather than outside toward the clients. We can think about that. So yeah, this is a fil rouge about going throughout the whole presentation. Agile is ultimately, and so it should be the means and to achieve our goals, to aid our business, and it's never should be or could be the goal on itself. So I think we need to take from it whatever it can give us to our specific situation. And yeah, as I did a bit of tribute for heavily regulated systems at the beginning, I would like to give a short tribute to our profession at the end. As project managers, we are not administrators, we are creators, movers, and changers, and optimizers, and motivators. And yeah, we are brave people, and we can take calculated risks if we think it is appropriate in our cases, because yeah, there is nothing that can really substitute experience. Thank you very much, and good luck to all.
That's very true, Mirjana, for sure. And it's interesting because this actually came up in a webinar that we had last week. We are not administrators, we are managers. I do think it's such a valid point. I will take away sharing if you don't mind. I just want to go through.
Yes, please.
No, you're perfect. I just want to go through the Menti poll and just show people a few of the. I'm just trying to go back through it, and it will behave for me. Maybe it will. Yep. But that actually did come up last week. We are not administrators. We are managers. So we should have some control. But I like the way you did refer to the bad boy image at the beginning, and I think that maybe if I share from my point of view, certainly as a project manager, I was not the person introducing Agile. It was being introduced by the technology department, or just engineering department, maybe to put it in that perspective. And I think going back to what you referred to as one of the challenges around culture and perception, I think the initial issue, which has been hard, I think, for Agile to shake off since then, has been this doesn't need project managers. This is something that can go on because, and that's the reflection of this bad boy image. And I think it's taken a while for Agile to recover from that. And I think maybe the repeated phrase is that Agile is the means. Essentially, it's not the end goal. I think if it's going to repair its reputation, it needs to focus on what the benefit is that it can give people. If you guys can, I think, Mirjana, can you see my screen there?
Yes, I can.
Mirjana, can you see my screen there? I just want to check with you.
Yes, I can.
Perfect. So just to go through, because we do have a couple of questions and comments, and we may not be able to answer them all right now. But I suppose first is just to say that with a great mix of people joining us today, obviously quite a lot of people from the four corners of Ireland, and we also have people joining us from Italy and the United States, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, I think that's the first time, and from Slovenia and Serbia. So we've got so welcome to everybody. We've got quite a wide group of people. In terms of the types of roles that are joining us today, this is very interesting, I think, as well, because it's not just project managers and people in the area of project management. We have actually a couple of Scrum Masters who've joined us as well, and business analysts and DevOps managers. And I think all of us in all those roles are involved in the Agile practice, essentially. So it's quite a mix of people today. More interestingly, do you currently work with Agile practices? So there's an interesting split there. So there's a good few people there that haven't had experience with it or aren't currently working with it. So it's an interesting take on it. How long have you been working with Agile yourself, Mirjana?
For about 6 years, I would say, no longer. But as I mentioned before, I did maybe knowingly, maybe unknowingly at the beginning, I employed some practices, and I was really, as you mentioned, Agile at its very beginning, it was really in some respects, it was excluding to the project managers. And it's also, I thought that this is not really a whole picture that it should be, should be taken to the consideration. So I'm really glad that things are evolving now. So it's very rare to occur now the people who would like to, practice Agile because of Agile itself, because this is not really what we are here for, I think. And yes, it is evolving, and it is on its way. And yeah, at least some bits and pieces, I think, can be really helpful to many people. Also, maybe in, as you mentioned, in testing, in some divided, in some separated maybe areas on the project or so on, or maybe just to think how in the particular project we could bring the product on, so to be able earlier in the product to be seen, to really tease out these problems we will have, because no one just would like to cross everything in one big bang at the end of the project. I really think that there are bits and pieces we can all use.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you on that. And I think that, as I was saying earlier, I definitely personally have seen the benefits in that iterative approach, where you are seeing in development and in tests, you are seeing the product come together gradually, and you are getting an opportunity to understand what it is that's being delivered, and not getting that big shock at the end, essentially. We've got a few comments here, actually, so I'll try and flick through. I never fully managed to affect the scroll here on this, but bravo. So Mirjana,
thank you.
I actually do like this one, and maybe the two of us could probably answer it, is how do you handle the requests for the large amount of status reporting? And now I have to say, this is not just something in heavily regulated industries, and we may do a separate session in the future on communications and status reporting in projects. But like, from your experience, have you gotten into or involved in, because you mentioned the sprints there, have you gotten, like, involved in maybe, for example, reporting on the velocity of the project, or how have you handled status reporting in the Agile environment?
Well, I was maybe lucky, because in this my most notable Agile experiences, I was working on Agile with the client directly. So we jointly established these ways of reporting on tracking. They have two teams, so we had 4 in this project, and this was not, such a pressure, and we were, pressure in a way, it was the same for all, and we were refining this reporting as we went. So maybe in some respect, I was lucky in that personally.
I think that probably goes back to your initial slides, though, where you talked about the challenges, and like one of them being that buy-in, that you have to make sure, if you're going to ensure the success. For me, status reporting is a challenge, whether your project is run waterfall or agile.
By all means.
There's a balance to be struck, and it involves a lot of conversations, and some of them are tough conversations. But I would have to agree with whoever put this comment in. There's a big amount of status reporting, I think, more and more being leveraged against projects, not just agile ones. But I think one of the things I've actually seen work, maybe not directly with status reporting, but just in general with the amount of reporting that's required sometimes, is one of the options, the opportunities you have maybe in agile is around your sprint planning. And if you associate a piece of work against the reporting that has to get done, often by visualizing it and showing people how much effort from the team is required to pull that reporting together, sometimes it can have a sobering effect on people. And then I think on the positive side, with the use of the sprints and that ability to kind of report on things like velocity, there are a lot of very useful reports that do actually come out of particularly using sprints. So there are some options there, I do think.
And it's also always worthwhile to put much effort in the part of reporting which really gets to people. You know, unfortunately, we were all been there that we needed to report maybe in a ways that were not so keenly followed by the audience. So maybe the way would be to really emphasize, maybe to make a parallel point of reporting which really gets to people, and on the same time try to show them what is not really necessary, what they can get maybe more explicitly in these simpler ways, and in that way optimize also the reporting, because this really is an issue generally. Some environments tend to really produce that effect, this I mean, too much reporting with no real outcome. It's an effort to optimize that, to be sure.
Yeah, it's definitely an issue across the board. But I suppose the idea around agile, I think in our heads, is that the engineers, the developers, the testers are allowed to go and develop and test, and there's an attempt to minimize their interruption, basically. So it is interesting, but I do think it's worthy of a follow-on across the board, not just on the agile. I think this is an interesting one, and I probably touched on this earlier, Mirjana, as well, as how would you approach fixed price procurement regulations and agile? So getting buy-in, supporting the agile delivery. It's like, you probably note a particular concern here. There is a worry over never-ending projects. So like for me, I've been involved in quite a few projects that have started with a bid and a successful bid. And part of that bid process, and we actually touched on this in last week's webinar as well, part of that bid process, you do share quite a lot of information. The company is interested to know and to get comfort, not just contractual comfort, but a real kind of an understanding. And they want to kind of build trust in the background that we're going to give you this money and we're going to get our product at the end of it. And we want to know when the end of it is as well. So I guess, have you, Mirjana, yourself come across that issue with your clients with regards to, well, how many sprints will there be and when will this end? When will you give me a delivery? Is that something that you've come across?
Yes, definitely. This is always a challenge. So we need to have. In any case, we would say no one, neither the client, neither the provider, no one wants to have indefinite projects, never-ending projects. It just doesn't work. In any case, I think at the beginning we need to have some sort of frame. And we will need then throughout the projects move within this frame of functionalities, this frame of goals, because we definitely need to come to an end, right? And it's obviously paid well to set initial frame of requirements at the beginning, and to really understand from both sides that then we will refine that, but that we will anyway need to stay within this commercial and timeline obligations we accepted or have given.
Yeah, I think it doesn't take away from again the project management of it. And even, you know, if it is, that's the engagement again with the product owner, the scrum master, and if there is somebody as a project manager, because I have come across situations where no project manager is there and no project manager has been required. That's a very positive experience, but it doesn't take away from the tough conversations that need to be had. That, you know, as you said, this is what we've delivered. So we, you know, Agile is, and I think someone has actually called it out as the quote there as well, that Agile is the means and never the goal. And someone's actually quoted it in the comments back as well, that you need to keep your eye on that, so that whatever methodology you choose to use to deliver, that it's understood that there's a contract in place with the customer. So I think you gave this piece of advice in your early slides as well. You talked about familiarizing yourself. And since we're talking about heavily regulated industries, the first thing you do is you assess those regulations, and then you decide how Agile would best fit. And I would say it's exactly the same advice when it comes to a fixed bid or a fixed price piece of work, that you assess the piece of work and then you see how Agile best fits that piece of work. So that you're not trying to hammer a square peg into a round hole.
No. I mean, Agile is no magical wand. We still operate in with regular laws of physics and economy, and this is the way it is. Like.
Yeah. But it's interesting, and I've called this out here because this is definitely, and I think you said there, it's no magic wand, and I just called out this one. What is your opinion and experience about following Agile procedures like refinement, retrospective? It could be time consuming, and Agile does come with, you know, there's, again, I think daily stand-ups, the retrospectives are mentioned there as well. And again, the question is for you, what's your opinion and your experience around that? Do you find it to be time consuming?
Yes, actually, this is the very thing I removed from presentation, not to be too long. So I'm glad we are talking about that. Yes, it is, especially at the beginning, and especially when we are getting accustomed on the process and are starting. But I think that it is not a bad thing in the beginning, because we obviously, as we just were talking, we need to set the project, we need to set the process, the final result we are expecting roughly. So this inevitably would take time, but throughout the course of the project, this should lessen. If not, then we need to ask ourselves why. So maybe there are some problems, underlying problems, which are just, you know, keep reappearing, or maybe I don't know, we need to by any case lessen this time frame. Sometimes this is just, you know, the nature of the people. Sometimes you just have, for example, team members who are you know, more eloquent than usual. This is very basic. I mean, also occurrence. I mean, Agile also, the role of Scrum Master is meant also to rein in this conversation. So the conversation is very good, and it is the essence of Agile, but still we need to have work done. We need here to really separate, to spot whether this is because of some underlying problems, either in the team or in the substance of the project, or this is just, you know, that a little more moderating role would be needed. It could go either way, in my experience.
Yeah, and it is interesting, because I you know, there's a lot of things like that happen in Agile that I think are very positive. Like, it is great that there is a retrospective regularly planned, but as you said, it still doesn't take away from the fact that there are people that won't speak up at all, and then there are people that will speak, and it is the challenge, I guess, as you said, it's in the Scrum Master's hand to control the timings and make sure that everyone gets their say, and that if the meeting is meant to be 15 minutes, it's 15 minutes. If the retrospective is meant to be 30 minutes, then it's 30 minutes. And you just have to stop it and get people into the habit of meeting the times. But I would echo what the commenter said. I mean, certainly it was my experience at the get-go that it was time consuming, and actually it was the engineers themselves and the developers themselves that were going, how many meetings do I have to go to? But once the timings were kept and the cadence got put in place and people were used to the tempo of it, and also it kept project managers out, because project managers weren't really meant to be in those Scrum meetings. So sometimes that makes developers happy, I think. Or maybe that's just me personally. Mirjana, there's a good few questions, and we will wrap up now, I think. But I just maybe end on this comment, because there's still a few little meaty questions there, guys. So as I said at the beginning, we'd probably share those with Mirjana, and there, we can maybe do some follow-up. But just in terms of just this one comment here, Mirjana, I like the idea of starting slowly and in smaller steps. Sometimes the teams are not ready for the new changes, and the full switch could stress them out. And I would probably even add to that and say that it's if you're trying to get buy-in, the smaller steps do work as well. That you're not big bangs work, I think, for some things, but I think in the case of Agile, you shouldn't overlook that it could stress the team out, and I think it's a very valid point to make. So Mirjana, I will move onwards, guys. So there's a good few comments that we didn't get to there. So Mirjana, if you're okay with that, I'm going to move forward and just run through a bit of a close down.
Sure, please.
Perfect. Guys, so I think most of you who have joined us today are familiar with the way we've gone through it. So just the first thing to note to everybody is thank you very much for joining in today and for sharing your comments and thoughts on the Mentimeter poll. We do share the results afterwards with the people, with the attendees who joined us. So we will share that. And as I said, we'll have a look through the comments with Mirjana, and if we may come back with some additional answers to some of the questions that we didn't get a chance to get through as well. So for everyone who's joining us who is a member of the PMI, because we do have some guests with us today, so also welcome to our guests, and hopefully you enjoyed the webinar. For our members and those of you who do have certification, you will earn 1 technical PTU for attending the webinar today, and there's the code. As usual, if you did register with your PMI member number, I'll take care of the registration for that if you attended. Otherwise, you can auto-register it yourself at a later date. Don't forget, we obviously have about 3 or 4 more events left to go to the end of the year, so there's still quite a full schedule. You can also avail of the projectmanagement.com webinars. We have an event coming up next week on the updates to the PMP exam, and we will take any questions with regards to collecting PDUs as well for your recertification in that meeting. So do register and join if you have any questions on that. And that's really about it. I mean, we're coming to the end. Mirjana, thank you so much for speaking to our members. As you can see, Agile continues to be a very popular topic, so thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. Thank you to you personally, and thank you, PMI Ireland, for having me.
Well, and we would say as well, again, and I've said it before, thanks to Comtrade Digital Services for sponsoring the webinar. We are a very small organisation, and the sponsorship that we get really does help us keep these webinars. And when we get back to face-to-face events, it does help us keep going. So a word of thanks to Comtrade. And thanks to Mirjana, thanks to everyone for attending. We had over 70 people join us today. So that's it, everyone. Thank you very much. And we look forward, hopefully, to joining you again next week for another webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, dear colleagues. Hear you soon, I hope. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mirjana.